I'm Tony Esselin.
And I'm Amy Bernard.
And we are here to help make it make sense.
This is the podcast that takes complicated science and breaks it down into easy to understand language.
So buckle up, buttercups. You are in for a bumpy ride.
All right. So we're back for another episode of Help Make It Make Sense. Yeah. So today what we're going to do is we're going to talk about terms and definitions, because I get a lot of questions from people about all the different terms that are out there when it comes to COVID-19, SARS-CoV-2. Like, I just get like a ton of questions. I think, I'm going to be honest, I think even scientists sometimes get a little confused with terminology and definitions. And so I thought that's where we'd start.
I think that sounds great. Yeah, I just finished reading a New York Times article with it. Within the article, they were fighting about what's a pandemic and what's endemic,
Totally.
And I was like, you know what? I'm not gonna worry about these words. Because it's just still a thing, is the way I'm gonna call it. It's still a thing. So
yeah, I mean, I think that, and sometimes I think we get, one of the things about science, we get really bogged down in our terms and our definitions and our jargon. And I think that, often we'll just throw around terms like this, in the public, and people have no idea what we're talking about. And,
or we break down these words with bigger words. I love that. Let's explain this with more difficult words. And you're just like, what are you doing? Like, just break it down. Like, what are you saying? You don't even know what you're saying half the time, Yeah. So
my
biggest, like, drill it down for y'all.
Yeah, totally. My biggest pet peeve too is when scientists will like define a word with like a bunch of other jargon, and sometimes even the word that they're defining slips in, and I'm like, no.
Yeah, that's right. That's not how you define things. You define with the word. That's not how it works.
That's the game taboo. Nope.
Yeah.
Fail.
Exactly. Yeah, we're just trying to change it. We're trying to change it up. I've seen a lot of educational videos from a lot of our colleagues, and it's we're the ones that are like sitting on the bench in the park being like, hey, you want to chat?
Exactly.
Like super professional. And
yeah. No, I like that.
We're chatting with y'all. We want to have like a little community circle where we're just discussing things where you guys feel comfortable. Right. So like bring things that you think are basic, that like we love to break down, to like make sure that you have a fundamental understanding. So exactly. I'm gonna let you get off. Go ahead, go for it.
So the first term that I wanted to talk about was the word strain. Because people talk about strains all the time. So when you look up the definition of the word strain, in the context of like viruses, what I've seen for definitions is that it is a version of the virus that has unique and stable characteristics, meaning that it's different than other viruses, and it's had those characteristics like for long periods of time. So unique and stable. So it's had it for a long time. I would like us to think about strain as, I like to make analogies, really honestly to help me, but I know sometimes it helps other people. So I think we can think of the term strain like dogs. There are a lot of dogs in the world. When you look at a dog, it's a dog, right? And because I am a visual person and we want you to go to our YouTube channel just for fun, I'm sharing a PowerPoint.
Uh-oh, y'all, we're getting a PowerPoint in this podcast. Hello.
But I'm still going to tell, I know this is
funny.
It's a
You know,
podcast.
it took how many episodes before we started to pull out
I know.
visual graphs?
I know. I couldn't help it. So like what you know though is if you think of the word strain like dogs, and so like a virus strain, you know, it's a virus. It's got characteristics of a virus, but there are different strains of viruses. Just like when you look at dogs, and if on my PowerPoint here, I'm showing you, you look at an English bulldog, stocky and short and lovable, you know that's a dog. But if you look at an Irish wolfhound,
I just want to point out for our listeners that she put the English bulldog in the middle because that's what she has, and she put my precious German Shepherd in the corner. So I'm just pointing out this is one of those things we call in science called like bias, and this is a personal thing. You can go on.
No, that wasn't. I'm not biased at all. English bulldogs, I think I ranked #1. So I mean, I don't know.
Oh, wow. Look at that. You hear it? You heard it here first, you guys.
I also have a French bulldog who's also on the slide.
Also in the middle. Also in the middle.
Also in the middle.
Just want to point that out.
My point here is, in the German Shepherd here, in the beautiful German Shepherd on the corner, there are a lot of dogs on this slide. I see English bulldogs, German Shepherds, Dalmatians, pugs, Dachshunds, Irish wolfhounds, Great Dane, Labs, you name it. Any dog, you see it, you know it's a dog, right? But these are different. Now, I know that this is not what people call dogs, but we can think of them as different strains of dogs, right? So you'd see different strains of viruses. It has the characteristics of a virus, but you're going to have different versions or different strains of them.
Well, then if that's the case, you can probably say you have different breeds of virus.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean,
the other way.
Right. So we use breed for dog, but I think in the context of viruses, we could probably use the term strain interchangeably with breed. Now, you know, if there are dog breeders out there or virologists that take offense to this, I don't care. I'm trying to explain
this podcast is not for you.
Right. I'm trying to explain this to the general public who know what dogs are.
That's right.
And when you look at it, what's the most interesting thing about, I think, you know, dogs is if I were to be walking down the street and I see a Chihuahua, I'm like, oh, a dog. If I'm walking down the street and I see a lab, oh, it's a dog. You know, I know that those are dogs. Now, there are different, obviously very different types of dogs, but that's like when we have viruses, we have influenza virus, we have chickenpox, we have SARS-CoV-2, we have all these different strains of viruses that have unique and stable properties that make them the type of virus or the strain that they are. So, Dr. Tony, do you think that kind of, does that make sense?
Yeah. Makes sense to me.
Okay, cool. So then there within, so I'm going to break down another term within, so let's say, so the example obviously we're going to be talking about for virus strain in this podcast is SARS-CoV-2. So severe acute respiratory syndrome, coronavirus 2. So that's SARS-CoV-2. So within that strain of SARS-CoV-2 with those unique and stable characteristics, there are variants. So that's another kind of jargony term that people throw around all the time. So with variants, the difference between variants has to do with their genome or genetic instructions, or what we can think of as like the blueprint to make all of the stuff that's needed by that virus or the dog or the human or whatever, right? So variants are their genome, their genetic instructions are going to differ from that original version, right? So we have SARS-CoV-2 is the original, the OG, And then we have other variants, and some of them have been called like alpha or delta. There's, as we all know now, Omicron. So there are all these different variants. So
can I just interject
yep.
one thing to just make clear while we're talking about these different names? The 19, I get this all the time. Like, what does the 19 stand for? And it means the year. It's 2019 that it became a thing.
Yep.
And so when it was discovered. And so that's I've heard people say, oh, it's the 19th version of and I'm like, nope, no, that's the year. The versions are what you're talking about.
Yeah. Yep. And then, and exactly. So that COVID-19 just means it was discovered in late 2019. So if we would have found it, if it would have been discovered or come about in 2020, it would have been COVID-20.
Right.
As an example. Right. Okay. So we got strains and we got variants. Of course, I'm going to bring it to dogs. I know. English Bulldog. So we got strains.
The English Bulldog front and center, people.
I know. Once again, the English Bulldog. Oh, English Bulldogs are so wonderful. But okay, so strain we think of as like dog, the dog breed, viral strain. One type of dog or variant would be an English Bulldog. And you can, when you look at an English Bulldog, there may be a lot of different, they might look very different. Like you can have one that's all white, one that's brown and white, one that has, a bunch of like brindle kind of like mottled, spotting and things on its coat. But you look at it and you're like, it's slobbery, it's chunky, it's lazy. Oh, that's an English Bulldog. Like, that is the type of dog. So that's, I guess I like to think of that. You can think of the different variant within. What do you think about that?
That sounds good.
Okay, cool. So why do we get these different variants? Another term is going to be mutation. So people throw around the word mutation all the time, and mutation is just a change to the genetic instructions. So a mutation would be a change like from that original in the genetic instructions. That could be, and this happens during viral replication. So it could be a change to, some type of viral enzyme that plays a role in taking over your cell. It could be a change to the spike protein.
Time out. Can you define enzyme?
Oh yeah. So an enzyme is just like a protein that I want to say the word catalyzes. I don't think I want to say that either. It's a protein that is responsible for like the action of some function. So like there are enzymes that play a role in helping the virus make more genetic instructions. There are enzymes that play a role in helping the virus make spike proteins. So they're kind of like the action messengers of the cell in a sense, I guess. They carry out functions for the cell. Do you agree with that?
Yeah.
Okay. Or would you say it differently?
I mean, I kind of look at them as scissors. They kind of like giving the haircut.
That's one function.
Yeah.
Of enzymes, but that's not all though. Right. Like RNA polymerase.
But a scissor is a tool. So it's kind of like a tool.
Oh yeah.
It's a tool to kind of achieve a goal.
A function, to carry out a function.
Right.
Yeah, they're kind of like the action. There's a lot of different enzymes, which are, proteins that carry out a function, I think, in the cell.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we have these different, so mutations just are random. They occur frequently and they arise during replication. And one of the things we found about SARS-CoV-2 is that they incur mutations seems to be very rapidly. very frequently and very rapidly during replication. One of the reasons for that is that SARS-CoV-2 is an RNA-based virus, so its genome is ribonucleic acid. And ribonucleic acid, again, it's just the version of genetic instructions for this type of virus. But when RNA replicates, it's error prone, meaning that it's more likely to make these errors or mutations frequently, more so than like a DNA or deoxyribonucleic acid genome, like is what we have, like what we're made of. And one of the reasons is there's just, how proofreading, when you're doing, you're typing up an email and you get a typo, and then it will often tell you, you're wrong. There's a little underlining the letter. Well, so our, when DNA replicates, we have like this proofreading function. When RNA replicates, it doesn't. So these RNA viruses can replicate, make more of themselves rapidly, and they're error prone and they don't have any proofreading. So because of that, they make mutations much more frequently and seems more rapidly. And all of this mutation is what leads to all these different, variants, having different versions of that original virus. So, and mutations, again, they're random, they occur frequently. And one of the reasons why we want to stop SARS-CoV-2 from infecting more and more people is because the more people that are infected, the more likely we are to have the virus be able to mutate and make, different variants of itself. Some of them are going to not work as well and they're going to die off. Some of them are going to work even better and become, more contagious, more transmissible to other people. And then we're going to have more and more infection. So what we see over time is as these different variants arise and they're better at being a virus and they're contagious and they can go from person to person better, we can see that is the variant that takes over. So I'm showing another, trying to lure you to our YouTube video. I'm showing another PowerPoint. I got this from New York Times, but it's the variant tracker. And we can see that it starts, we started with the original SARS-CoV-2, and then it's moved through all these different variants like alpha, gamma, beta, delta, and now we're on to Omicron. And then of course we have a lot of different kind of varieties of Omicron as well. So, but the more mutations, the more people that are infected, the more the virus gets to replicate, the more, kind of variants that we have of this virus. So we're at Omicron now. Are we going to end with Omicron? Probably not. There will probably be so many more variants down the road that might, that are probably going to take over. I mean, again, because the mutations that make these variants differ from the virus that they came from, some of those mutations are going to make the virus just better at being a virus, and that's the one that's going to take over. So we saw the Omicron wave late December, early January, and now here we are, end of July, almost August, and Omicron is still our biggest variant. Of course, there are little subvariants within, and I have a slide for that too, but I'll talk you through it. When you look in the media, and Dr. Tony, you can, jump in whenever you want, but people are always talking about within Omicron, all of these different lineages of Omicron. They talk about BA1, BA2, BA4, BA5. Right now, BA5 is the one that is kind of most prevalent. It's the most popular, if you will, of the Omicron viruses. And it's the one that we're seeing the most. You know, again, because of mutations, we might, this is probably not the last version, but one of the reasons why I brought this up is, you know, where does this terminology come from? Honestly, even I find it boring. Like, even I'm like, oh my God, why are you doing this to us? Like, why are you calling things BA 1, 2, 3, 4, 5? I'm over it. And even there are even worse. It's like, oh, well, it's BA 2.12.1. I'm like, what? Why are you doing this? And I'm not gonna go ahead.
No, I mean, I remember talking about this in grad school, and like
yes.
why are things named what they're named? And a lot of times people are just having fun in the lab. They're like either like I don't know what BA stands for, so I'm not going to pretend like I know. But there are things in genes and viruses, mostly genes. They have a lot of this fun in genetics where they just give things names, like the way they're feeling that day. It could be an initial of a name. It could be the initial of the people who discovered it. You know, there's a lot of so like that's when the nerds go like, yay, it's my time.
Well, we like naming stuff with this lineage stuff.
I'm not being derogatory. I'm saying
with this lineage stuff, it's a little bit different because I did kind of dive into it, and I'll talk about it just for a minute, but only so that people know that there's a reason. But like, you're right with genes. I remember that geneticists, like, I don't know if you remember this, but I think it was like back when we were still in grad school, people were naming genes, and like you said, they were naming genes like after just things they thought were fun. And there was one gene that somebody named Sonic Hedgehog.
Oh, you're kidding.
No, because they liked, you know, I mean, people name genes like just wacky stuff. So they named it Sonic Hedgehog. And there are a lot of genes that have kind of crazy names. But anyways, there was this like conference where all these geneticists and like physicians and stuff got together, and they're like, you know what? We're going to have to start naming genes a little bit more thoughtfully instead of creatively. The reason why is when you sit a patient down and say, not you, not me, you know, we've sequenced your genome, and the problem is there's a mutation in Sonic Hedgehog.
Yeah, exactly.
And it was just not, it just doesn't
feel good.
Professional.
No.
So I think that there have been like I think that there was a movement towards maybe stifling a little bit of that creativity, having it be a little bit more like
drier.
A little drier. I mean, which is sad because, you know, we as scientists sometimes like to, you know, that was like a fun outlet.
That's fun. Yeah.
But now, so anyways, but you're right. And I remember that being kind of like a big deal. And I'm like, that makes sense. I mean,
it was a big deal. There were a lot of genes that we laughed a long time.
Exactly.
At their age.
They've reined it in. But so as far as these lineages go, so Omicron has all these lineages of BA1, BA2, BA4, BA5. There is a particular kind of naming system for viruses. And the reason why they do this is because you can think of viruses like families, where you have grandparents, parents, aunts, uncles, cousins, siblings, you know, all these different, you know, crazy families, like just crazy families. And the way that scientists will keep track of where a virus comes from is they make these trees. We call them phylogenetic trees, but you can just think of them as like trees that branch. So, you know, you have the trunk, You can have 2 branches off that. Those branches come more branches, you know, and you
Oh
can.
my God, this is for you MCU lovers. It's like the timeline being branched.
Exactly.
The MCU,
I don't know what that is, but
the multiverse. Are you kidding me?
oh yeah, yeah.
The
Yeah, yeah.
multiverse.
Yeah,
and the
multiverse.
timeline, and then
Yeah.
the timeline branches, and
Yeah.
now you've something different.
Yep. No, yes. Okay. Yes, I know exactly what you're talking about.
That's for you MCU lovers out there.
Exactly, which we are. So, yeah, so that's how they keep track of it. And the system that people use is something called the Pango system, which if you want to look that up, you know, have at it. But I tell you, it is, yeah, there's a lot there. But like what I wanted to explain in the context of Omicron, if you have with this Pango system, the first branch would be A, and then something that branches off that would be A1, and then A1.1 and A1.2 and so on. And then the second would be B.1, B.1, 2, you know, so there is a little bit of reason to this absolute chaos. So their lineages.
What you're saying is BA is not Barry Adams. For example.
No, it is not. Although if that helps you remember it, then, you know, all these mnemonics that we use in like grad school and
oh my goodness,
get through it, you know,
we will not torture you with that.
Have at it. Yeah. So that's actually where it comes from. And then this was just a picture. Again, just a tree. You can think of it as this, we call them phylogenetic trees, but it really just is a tree, like a branch of relationships, starting at the very beginning with the original and then branching down. So this is now the end of my PowerPoint slide.
Where's the original on that last one?
I know that was, yeah. You know, it was at the very end. Yeah.
Oh, I couldn't. I can't.
I know.
Well, that's what you all get.
So yeah, so we went through strain.
Yep.
Variant.
Yep.
Mutations.
Yep.
We also went through like lineage, you know, how that's kind of broken down, the different kind of, you know, terms for Omicron, the BA1, the BA2, BA4, most popular right now, BA5. Just trying to let you know there's a method to our madness here in the science world, but we don't explain it very well. I would be honest, I don't think they even explain it very well to other scientists. Like the people that are into the making those trees, you know, there's nobody that like goes and tries to like explain it even to other scientists. It's like,
yeah, there's a lot of self-directed learning in this field. There really is, where you just you sit down and you're just like, yeah, okay, I understand, and then you have to go sit down for like 3 hours to be like, what?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
I mean, it's
pretty. Yeah, it's pretty involved. I mean, when I was starting to go down this road to kind of come up with this stuff for today, I was like, wow, I could spend like an entire day reading this. I do not want to.
Nobody does. Nobody does. But it does help you kind of try to understand like what we're looking at. And then the other thing with language and science language, I wanted to point out, because I made this point a couple of weeks ago with some family members who were saying that like, yeah, well, you know, Omicron is less bad than it used to be. You know, like people are, and it's like, you have to understand that we lost 1 million people.
Right.
Like that's the baseline. So when we say that it's less severe, that does not mean not severe.
Right.
That means severe, but less.
Right.
Like what your starting point is, right? And so when I hear things like, oh, it's only 400 people, you know, a day that are dying, I cringe. I'm like, I actually sat down and did the math. I saw something about like 400, it's down to 400 a day. And I'm like, okay, if you take the entire population of the United States, it's a sub percentage of the population. And it's 150,000 people a year.
Right.
Now,
That's
not benign. That is not nothing, you
yeah.
know? And so people are still, you know, we're in a place like a lot of the conversations I've been having is like in light of everything that you've just described in terms of variants and its mutations and where it's going, it's like, how do you live with this thing? You know, like we have to give up and start living with it, right? Like when I say give up, I'm saying like give up on all of our anxieties around it and live with it, you know?
Yeah.
And I'm you know, it's really hard, you know, when you've experienced loss from it.
Right.
It's hard to just be like, well, I guess, you know, you just throw your hands up, you know. I think we do have to learn to live with it. I think that's true. I think we do have to learn to live with it. I think that what's sad is that we are not responsibly living with it. And I'm not saying us as individuals necessarily, but I'm also saying the structures, the governmental structures that are in place.
Yeah.
Because we can, the way that there were things that were created to keep people protected.
Yeah.
You know, like the social distancing, making sure things were outdoors, all of those things are kind of masking, all of those things are like, they've literally fallen apart. Like people are like back in restaurants close together again, and you know, movie theaters are packed, and you know, all of those things. And it's like we didn't use this opportunity to think of how can we do business that's profitable better.
Yeah.
We didn't think through that, you know, and that's unfortunate. I think that's the thing that's sad. There are some things that are still holding on to it, but it's very rare that I see that.
Yeah.
And I think that like we do need to learn to live with it. I will, you know, I think I'm gonna be masking for the rest of my life now, because I'm just like not interested in getting the stuff that's out there. Like there's just too much.
Well, I would say that, you know, going back to the comment you said about, you know, how people are like, oh, this Omicron's not that bad. One kind of myth I want to make sure we dispel, which I think I've mentioned before, but I'm just going to say it again, is viruses don't mutate to become weaker. Right. They don't, like, some people are like, oh yeah, you know, it's gonna, over time, it's just gonna become weaker and we're gonna be able to live with it. No big deal. Mutations are random. Mutations are random. And because of that, we could have a version, a variant of the virus that comes out as you know, after Omicron, that is so much more virulent in the sense that it causes worse disease, right? So, I mean, just because, you know, we're having like, you know, Omicron maybe doesn't cause as serious disease in as many people, does not mean that this virus is ramping down and trying to live peacefully with us. That's a load of BS.
That's right.
Viruses mutate. They're trying to survive. It's this random incorporation of changes into their genetic instructions that could render the virus weaker. It could render the virus stronger. So that's a myth that I hear all the time. And, oh yeah, it's becoming weaker and it's, you know, we're going to be able to live with it. And I'm like, no.
Yeah. And I think what's important is that, like, we're not trying to be pessimistic and kill everyone's optimism that they're trying to push forward. I don't think that that's what we're trying to do, is say, look, this is the reality of the situation.
Yes.
Like, this is the reality. And it's like, yes, okay, 1 million people are hopefully, I don't know. I mean, I think if it's going at 400 people a day,
yeah,
we're going to get to 1 million.
Yeah.
Sooner rather than later, if that doesn't stop, if that doesn't stem, you know?
Yeah.
But the thing is that I think that, you know, while it is important to be optimistic, it is also important to be safe.
Yes.
You can be optimistic with the fact that cars are safer than they were, you know, 60 years ago,
Mhm.
and you still put on your seatbelt, to go back
Yep.
to your original analogy, right?
Yep.
Like they're way safer, right? You have airbags, you have
Yep.
automatic braking, you know, you have alerts and signals that's telling you somebody's to
Yeah.
the left and to the right, and all
Yep.
of those things that we didn't have before to like help you see your blind spots. There's
Yep.
all of these improvements, and put on your seatbelt. Do you
Right.
know?
Yeah.
So it's still the same. It's still the same thing. And so
Yeah.
we are I mean, I have to say I'm grateful that I was able to try to do something to protect my son. You know, finally I can give you a little story now. So we went to Disney, and I was petrified because I was like, oh my God, this virus is all over the place. And I hadn't gotten boosted. My last booster was in December. And I know, and from all the things that we know, I was like, oh God, I know I need another dose. Gratefully, I got my son vaccinated, his first dose before he went down, which I know is not that effective, but it was something, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And I got my parents boosted. And after a little bit of a struggle, they were like, I don't want, and I was like, okay,
You're doing it. You're doing it.
I was like, you're gonna go to Disney and get sick, you know what I mean? And,
Yeah.
and that's exactly what happened. We went to Disney and got sick, you know, and it was you know, we were with a lot of family members and everything, and somehow, some way, my son did not get it. He did not get it, which I was really grateful.
That is amazing.
Yeah, my other son did get it, but he was fully vaccinated, and he was like, in 2 days, you know, he was like snotty for 2 days, and then, you know, was a lot better. I had a harder time. I definitely had a harder time, but I was not in the hospital. And that's what I want to share. Like, this is the stuff. It's like, you know, again, I hit my head on the windshield, you know, but I didn't have to go to the hospital, you know. And,
Right.
And I'm really grateful for that. And my mom and my stepfather were like, oh, I have a headache for like a couple. My stepfather didn't feel a thing. He was like, I don't have COVID. What are you talking about? And I'm like, because you got boosted. He was like, I don't know what you're talking about. Whatever, you know. And it's allergies. That was my favorite. It's allergies. And then and my mom was like, she had a headache, you know, a little bit of sinus stuff, but in like 2 days she was better, you know. And it was like nobody went to the hospital.
That is awesome. That is
yeah,
so
nobody
cool.
went to the hospital. You know, there were a couple people that were a little sick. They needed some of the medications that are out there, but they're out there, so they were able to get them. And so you know, just trying to say that it's important to protect yourself as much as possible, as we all are trying to live with this thing.
So that was a little bit of bulldog shuffling, but yeah, no, I'm glad that you know, that your family was, even though they got COVID, that it was, their seatbelt worked, right?
The seatbelt worked, exactly.
No serious harm.
Nobody's
no
in the hospital. Nobody's in the hospital.
You couldn't prevent the crash because, you know, they inhaled it somewhere, but no serious harm, no death. And let's just say, as a bonus, probably, you know, a little boost to their immune system right there. Another.
Right. Well, that's the other thing, is that it'll be interesting to see now. I mean, the map of the United States per the CDC is at like 99% Omicron everywhere. And so it'll be interesting to see what other surges lurk, like how significant they are. We're still, again, we always say it every podcast, we are still learning about COVID. So we have more to learn, and we're all kind of like holding our breath. The clinicians, we're all holding our breath about the fall, because like, oh God,
I know.
They're going to go to school. It's going to be cold. All the colds are coming back. You know, the precautions are down, and it's just, we're not looking forward to it. Let me just tell you.
No, I know. I you know, I agree with you. I think that you know, I don't think that Omicron's going to be our last variant. You know, people are continuing to get infected, and more infection than ever, because this BA5, the lineage of Omicron, is the most transmissible or contagious that we've seen. You know, I mean, we've kind of had like another spike in a sense. You know, it's interesting. I was talking to a friend of mine who's an ICU nurse, and she's been working all through the pandemic, like, you know, and I was like, you know, we had that surge in like January, and it seems like, you know, we kind of hit another one. And she was like, it hasn't stopped. She's like, as an ICU nurse, there has not been, like, we haven't had a day since it started, the pandemic started, where I haven't had a COVID patient. She's like, maybe I have less, but I have them. You know, she's like, I'm seeing COVID patients all the time. So she's like, as far as I'm concerned, you know, it hasn't, you know, it hasn't stopped. Like, it's not like, you know, she'll have waves of more, but it's, you know, it's never like gone down to zero. So I thought that was interesting because, you know, I wasn't suggesting the pandemic was over by any means. I was just like, oh, you know, maybe there you had like a lull. She's like, well, maybe a little bit, but we always still had COVID patients because there are always people that have, you know, other health issues where COVID's going to hit them harder, you know? So, so they're like people on chemotherapy, people with cancer, people with autoimmune diseases, like just all kinds of stuff. So going back,
we have a new epidemic on our hands here. So which we won't talk about this podcast. We'll talk about it next. But
I think we should talk about that one next. But I was one thing I wanted to also mention with these different variants and how it affects your immune system and your immune response. This is you know, questions I get all the time too, like, well, if Omicron and Delta and Alpha and all these different, you know, variants of SARS-CoV-2, if they're all SARS-CoV-2, well, like, why isn't my immune system just responding to them all the same? You know, why isn't my immune response like the same to every variant? Which I think is a really valid and honestly really, really good question, you know? So, going back to like mutations and those random changes that are in the genetic instructions of the virus, when you think about, and I can see SARS-CoV-2 cartoon in my head. I do not have a visual for this one, but let's just imagine like you can see SARS-CoV-2, the viral ball with those little spike proteins. They kind of look like golf tees that are shoved into, you know, the virus ball. If you think about the immune system, when it encounters that virus ball, it sees the outer coat. It sees those little spike proteins, like the golf tees that are stuck all over, right? So if your immune system sees those spike proteins and it builds cells and immunity and antibody, which, you know, we all love, and to that spike protein, that one that it saw, well, the next time, let's say that, you know, there's another variant, the spike proteins have randomly changed, that new variant comes into your body and the spike proteins look different. So let's say the first version, they were red, now they're orange, and your immune cells and antibodies that were made and recognize that the red spike protein, the orange one's a little different. It's not gonna work as well, right? And then like another variant could have spike protein that's yellow or green or blue. You get my, you know, just different, I'm thinking of different colors of things. But so your immune system is trained on what it saw. And if something comes in that looks different, like if the spike proteins had been mutated and look different, your response is just not going to be the same. It's just not going to be as good because you were trained on the red one and now it's yellow, right? So like, oh, I kind of recognize it a little bit, but it's just not as good. So like that, I think is, you know, is important to think about. Your immune system is trained on what it saw. And when something new comes in, you know, it's like, just visual, you can think of it like, I'm using colors, but like visual identification. It's kind of like witness protection program. The virus is like, you know what? I do not want to be recognized by the immune system. I'm going to put on a mustache.
Yeah.
I'm going to cut my hair. And maybe I'm going to like, you know, change the color of my hair. Or maybe I'll even have plastic surgery, which that's extreme.
Right.
You know, or if you're watching Mission Impossible, I'm going to change out my eyeballs.
Yeah, right.
You know what I'm saying though? Like viruses
sure.
kind of like enter the witness protection program when they change themselves. They want to look different enough that your immune system cannot respond. So you can kind of think of it that way. But so, you know, if you were vaccinated and you know, you have your 2 doses and then you got your 3rd dose that a lot of people call the booster, and you made a lot of great antibody to what was in the vaccine, but then you come into contact with, you know, you're wearing your seatbelt, your vaccine seatbelt, but you come into contact with, you know, Omicron respiratory droplets. Somebody coughed. There's a pocket of
freshly coughed pocket of air
that you just happen to walk into. The reason why your immune system, I know it's so gross. You know how you caught COVID, right?
I know. You can see it. You can see it. Have you ever been in an elevator or someplace where the lighting and you see somebody speaking and you just see
oh yes. So gross. I know. I can't. Yeah.
It's all of us. We all do that.
But yeah, but so exactly. So we all walk into these pockets of air. If you're wearing your mask though, you got better protection. But so you walk into this, you're vaccinated, you know, you've got your seatbelt on, but you're walking in to an area where there's freshly coughed, you know, Omicron filled air.
So gross.
You breathe it in. So it's the crash. The seatbelt has not prevented the crash because you've come into contact. But the reason why your immune system is just not completely eliminating that Omicron is because those spike proteins look different. So your immune system that's been trained against those, mostly the spike proteins, because that's what the immune system sees. That's what's on the outside, you know, just like you see the outside of a person. Like I look at you right now, I can't see your brain. I know it's there and it's big, but like, you know, I only see your head. I see the part covering it, right? So you see what's on the outside. So your immune system is the same way. So it's when something that looks different comes in, it's just not going to respond as well. It's might still have some recognition. Like we know there's some recognition. It's just not, you know, as amazing. So the antibodies that you make in response to the vaccine, remember that's the cache in the blood, right? The cache that you can throw at the virus, and it surrounds the virus and neutralizes it. That we find just doesn't work as well because that virus just looks different.
Right.
But the one thing that's the silver lining here with Omicron is that another cell that's trained in our body that's called a T cell, but the point is these cells, most of the time we think of them as being the killer cells, and they kill virally infected cells. It seems like with Omicron, from what I've read, that the T cells are still doing a pretty kick-ass job. So while the antibody isn't maybe neutralizing and surrounding and eliminating as well as we would have hoped, it seems like the T cell, those are the cells that the ninjas that come in and like, you know, kill an infected cell. They karate chop the infected cells. Seems like they're still doing a pretty kick-ass ninja job.
That's pretty good. I mean, something has to be happening because people are sick, but not as sick as they were.
Yeah.
And so I think something is happening. It's not as robust.
Right.
And so that's why things are changing. And people may have heard in the news that there's a new update to the vaccine that's coming out in the fall. And there's going to be more. We told you that in the booster episodes, right? Like in the 87 dose
the additional dose episode.
The additional dose episode where we talked about the fact that they're going to be like, we should just eliminate the word booster because like it's just we're just going to keep updating the vaccine for according to its needs, the same way that we do with the flu.
Yep.
You know, we're looking at it again. Yeah, so just expect that I will definitely be one to make sure I get my updates because that was not fun. Even with the vaccine, it was just not fun. You know, everybody knows me. I'm energetic and hyper, and I'm like always ready to go on doing something, and I couldn't do anything. I was like laid out for a few days actually. And so do everything our like PSA, like in terms of like, you know, blah, 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 Dr. Tony and Dr. Amy, like, how do we live with this thing? You know, what I would say to you is that, number one, just mask when you're around people you don't know, when there's too many people, try to stay away. Like you can go to your events, but know what your risk is going to be. Like get like, make sure that you're updated, get your vaccine. So at least you have some layer of seatbelt for the situation. Like we did when we went to Disney, knowing that we were going into a fire. Make sure that you're updated, get your vaccines, test as much as you can. You know, I know it's expensive, but there are some insurance plans that are paying you back for your tests. Make sure you always have them on hand. Make sure, like, assess your risk for being really sick. And so like if you are a person who's somebody who has a lot of comorbidities, which means a lot of diseases, a lot of conditions, for example, more than one, right? Like if you've got hypertension and something else, like that's you. Okay. I would suggest talking to your doctor about treatments for COVID in case you get them, just so you're prepared ahead of time and you can access them. Like, what are the treatments? What would I be eligible for? Like, find out that information. Right now, there's a drug called Paxlovid that folks are getting and that a couple of my family members got, and it made a difference, made a huge difference. Because they were close to hospitalization and that stopped it, because, older folks, right? So what's really important is to find out the treatments, understand the risk in your area, right? And so when the media is like, oh, it's lower doesn't mean low.
Right.
It means lower. So try to pay attention to the language that folks are using, because if they're like less severe, less bad, it doesn't mean that it's not severe, it's not bad, right? And so you have to assess, like, what's your risk of getting really, really sick? For real, like not your like fantasy I'm healthy that we all do to ourselves, right? But like, are you older? Do you have are you taking medications for a condition, that just assume that you are going to be at a higher risk, right? Find out what like what would it do to you if you got infected? Like, what would that take away? Do you have time off from work? Is all of that stuff set up? Do you have childcare? Like, all of those things you have to think about. Like, that's what I had to think about, being down with a young child, and thankfully my husband, I don't know how, was negative the whole time. So like we were masking and sanitizing and spraying Lysol and doing all kinds of things, and it worked. We were able to preserve him and my younger son. But I think that like, you can live with, we have no choice but to live with this, obviously, right? We have no choice but to live with this, but prepare, right? Just like you're going on a hiking trip, you don't just kind of, unless you're Tony Esolen, you don't walk out the door sneakers and be like, oh, I should have brought blah, blah, blah. I do that all the time. But most people are like, let's get some water. Let's make sure we have some food. Let's make sure we have some like bug spray and, a Band-Aid kit, like whatever. You get prepared when you're going to do something. And that's what we're doing. That's what we're just suggesting that you do. And yes, you can live with this. We have no choice but to go ahead and live with this, but there are things that we need to do in order to keep ourselves and our families as safe as possible.
Yeah, I agree. I think that one of the most important things people can do is think about, the risk of, where you're going, how much COVID is in the area. If you're traveling, like how much COVID is in the area. Like if you're going to a place where there's very little COVID, maybe you can do a little bit more things in certain areas. Whereas if you're going to go into a city that's just overrun with COVID, you better be wearing that mask and be all up to date on vaccines and, be doing all of the things you can to protect yourself. Like, I make those choices. Like, I wear a mask quite a bit, more than most people. Like, I'll go into the grocery store. I'm wearing my mask the whole time. I am one of like probably 20% of people wearing a mask. And here's why. When I go to the grocery store, I'm not going to catch COVID from some rando at the grocery store. I mean, come on. Like, that is not how, if I'm going to get COVID, that is not how I'm going down. If I'm going to go down with COVID, it's going to be some like, awesome experience where I'm like, you know what? Like Disney, yeah. I'm taking the mask off because I want to be normal in this.
I need to hug Mickey Mouse, man.
Yeah. I mean, exactly. But like, I'm not going to get it at a grocery store. I'm not going to go into a gas station bathroom and get it there. Like, I mean, come on. There are places where I am just like, if I go down there, I'll be pissed. I mean, I'm pissed anyways.
Yeah.
By the way, let's just go over 50% of podcast hosts have now had COVID.
Yeah, man. I was
1
down.
out of 2.
I thought about that statistic and I was like, oh no, it's down from 100.
We went from 100% COVID free to 50%. Now, the reason why our plummet was so big is because there are 2 of us. So again, as a educator in the science realm, numbers matter.
Numbers matter. It's only 2 of us, and now it's 50%.
Exactly.
So now the new tracking will be how many times. And so my intention is never to catch it again is my intent.
Yeah.
So let's see.
And I just read this article too, and this was in this is the Wall Street Journal. So this is not like very sciencey, but it was like the headline was like, if you think you haven't had COVID yet, think again. And I was like, oh, really, Wall Street Journal? What are you going to tell me? What are you going to inform me of? So I read it and I'm like, doesn't seem very sciencey to me, but whatever.
No.
But what their point was, there are a lot of people, not a lot, but certain, like I think it's like 20% or something that still seem to get, and don't hold me that number, but will have COVID with like either asymptomatic or symptoms that seem kind of like allergies. So some people are like, oh, I got allergies, and then don't test or whatever. So, and I do have bad allergies, and I've tested a couple of times and it's always been negative. And there have been like 1 or 2 times I'm like, God, this has gotta be it. Nope. So anyways, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, I agree with you. I feel like I'm one of the few now. I don't know.
I mean, there's so many people who have avoided it up until now who got it this year.
I know. I don't know. But anyways, so yeah, you gotta take where you are, how much COVID is in that location. And then, use the tools that you can, get vaccinated, wear the mask. Like Dr. Tony said, talk to your doctor about, what you would need to do if you were to get it. So if you have a lot of other disease like that Paxlovid, that's an antiviral that kind of stops the virus from replicating more or less. Like you get that on board, you're going to shut down the whole viral, factory. So go for it,
That's right. And sometimes you might not know this, like depending on your risk, like we do this a lot of times with medications, like we can prescribe it for you. You don't have it, but you're going into a danger zone, you know, and then you just keep it on hand in the event so that you don't have to go through the problem of like, going to an urgent care or that kind of stuff. Like just be prepared, and that's one thing that you can discuss with not everybody will do it, but like a lot of us will. So just discuss with your doctor what your options are. And don't keep it to yourself if you've got it. Like make sure you go out and make sure that you're not getting too sick, so
yeah. You mean don't keep it to yourself, like you don't mean go off and spread it to people. You mean go and tell your doctor.
Yes. Yes.
I just want to make sure that's not misinterpreted. Like,
Oh my God.
go
Don't
and
keep it to
cough.
yourself. Spread it around. Make sure
Go and-
everybody gets sick around you. No.
Go
no.
to like the park and just cough all those pockets
Oh
of
my
air.
gosh. Oh my God. Hilarious. Hilarious.
I just wanted to make sure,
I appreciate that.
I knew what you were saying, but
I appreciate it.
so I think that was all that I wanted to I think those were the main, terms, and just kind of talking through like, what is Omicron compared to SARS-CoV-2? What is BA5? Like, what are all these things? And what I will do is I'm going to send you the PowerPoint, and it has all the links to the different like CDC and New York Times variant tracker and all the places that I got some of that, just in case.
Yeah, we'll put it in the show notes. And
People want to look that up. And if you want to see, this is, this was the appetizer that I was trying to go for, was if you want to see the PowerPoint that includes pictures of dogs, you come to our YouTube channel.
And see the personal bias of the English Bulldog in the center and the German Shepherd on the side.
Hey, I at least included a German Shepherd.
Yes, I would have been mad. Poor Xena wants to be represented.
Exactly.